This is an American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theatre. It's coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, which is located on 42nd Street. 42nd Street, where Off-Broadway and Off-Broadway all meet to present their wares, to present their talent, and present quality theatre so that they nurture, they feed each other, all to the benefit of the audience. The American Theatre Wing is very proud of its Tony Award, which is not for the longest run or the greatest review, but it's for recognition of the achievement of excellence in the theatre. And that's very important. The audience is the beneficiary of that. And what the American Theatre Wing does is to continually try to feed theatre into the audiences and into the communities. We have a year-round organization. We say theatre. We are dedicated to servicing the community through the theatre, through our Saturday Theatre for Children program, which is just that. We bring live professional theatre into elementary schools, and children line up to see professional theatre at a very early age. We have our introduction to Broadway theatre, which is a very important and a very wonderful program. And thousands upon thousands upon thousands of youngsters have come to see their first Broadway play. We do this program in cooperation with the New York City Board of Education, Junior and High School Division, and the wonderful generosity of the Broadway producers who have made it possible for the children to see this show, and also not only to enhance their horizons and to learn a new language, but also, I hope, it provides the audience of the future. These seminars are brought to you because we feel that it's important to know what it is to work in the theater, what it is to work in the theater through the eyes of the performer, the play script, the director, the scene designer, set designer, the producer, the unions and guilds, how to work with them and how they work for you. We believe in theater. We also send professional theater to hospitals and nursing homes and aid centers so that those who can't come to the theater have the theater brought to them. And this, again, is done because it's the American Theatre Wing with the theater community. I'm indeed very proud to be part of an organization such as that can call upon the people that we do, not only for the seminars, but also for our programs year-round. And now I'm going to turn this seminar over to our co-moderators, George White, who is president of the Eugene O'Neill Center in New Waterford, Connecticut, and Brendan Gill, who has long been a New Yorker, an author, and a critic. And this seminar is on the production. We have the producers of that wonderful play, Damn Yankee, and we're going to ask them, it's a whole team of the production of Damn Yankee. And we're going to ask them all the questions, where it came from and how it got to where it is. Would you take this over now, Brendan and George? Thank you for coming.
I'm singularly unfit to be a co-moderator of this program because I, as a child in 1927, gave up reading very much about baseball when my hero, my Yankee of that day, push him up, Tony Lazzeri, was the main star of the whole baseball world. Things have changed, I understand, considerably since that time. But George White, not even born at that time, knows everything about baseball. On my far right is Rick Elice, who is officially the co-creative director of the theatrical advertising agency of Serena Coyne. Co-creative director is a very serious thing to be, but he shares a position with God. And he's also
known as Nancy Coyne.
He is said also to be, in spite of his extreme youth, a former dancer and actor. I don't understand how that's possible. And singer. Next, to Rick is Charlotte Wilcox, who's the general manager of the production. Broadway credits for Charlotte include Grease, My Fair Lady, and Fiddler on the Roof. And on my immediate right is another extremely tall young man. And we are looking up to all of you this morning, and that's Maxwell, who is the producer of the show and the president of something called Working Man Films. And working is pronounced working, and there was an apostrophe at the end, so he is pronouncing working as it was pronounced in the 18th century, and I'm very grateful for that backward glance.
All right, Brendan, thank you. I'm going to start off a little differently by starting on my immediate left with Mitchell Maxwell's sister, Victoria. And we have Tinker, Evers, and Chance. That's a whole other thing. But we'll start with Tinker here, who is Victoria Maxwell, who is the producer, vice president in charge of production at Working Man Films. On her left is Peter Cromarty, who is president of Cromarty and Company, an entertainment public relations firm, and playing in left field.
Actually, I think there's a Chance it's first base.
Chance, right. Frank Chance, absolutely. Right. Is Robert Barandes, who is a partner of the New York law firm of Roper, Barandes, and Fertile, who is also the legal advisor to Damn Yankees. So that's the lineup.
Now, you said before we came on this stage how interested you were in having a seminar of this kind in order to be able to tell all of us what the nature of a musical comedy production is. Young as you are, like Rick, you look extremely young to me.
Thank you.
But have you been in producing, and for how long? And is this the first major thing of this kind you've ever done?
No, I produced my first play in New York in 1975. I was 21. It ran about an hour. I mean, the show ran longer than an hour, but the run was about an hour. It was down at the Cherry Lane Theater. This is done about 15 shows off Broadway, and this is my second show on Broadway. And I started out much younger before this process began.
Mm-hmm. And you were just out of school at 21. And what were you?
I was actually still in college. I was still in college and had spent a great deal of time in college doing plays, directing plays, producing plays, and actually sold 50,000 shares of stock to kids in my dorm at $1 a share, and then bought a summer theater on Cape Cod in 1974 and produced and directed all the shows there for 3 years. And in a wild state of hubris, came to New York and produced a show in New York City.
Did the SEC know about that?
Oh yes, it was fully registered. Fully registered with the
Oh,
SEC, and it was a filed offering. Robert was not my attorney at the time, so I spent several years in jail, I think. But no, it was fully registered, and that's how I began.
Victoria, did he drag you along with him right over the cliff, or
To
what?
the Somerset Theater, actually. I was 12 years old, a costume mistress, yes. At that point.
Sure.
But I didn't work on his first off-Broadway show.
Where was the show on the Cape? Where was the theater on the Cape?
The theater was in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It was called the Priscilla Beach Theater. It was its claim was that it was either the oldest or one of the oldest summer barn theaters in the country, and it was really quite lovely. It was really quite lovely, and it was really one of those things right out of the Judy Garland.
Do you have it still?
Oh no, I ran it for 3 years and then actually got out financially solvent, actually with a profit by selling all the props and all the furniture, because we had two big farmhouses on the grounds in which all the actors and the musicians. It was non-union, so it was non-union. All the actors and the musicians lived in the houses. We gave them room and board and $15 a week.
You're very entrepreneurial.
Well, it started young.
You might sell me your jacket before.
I'd be delighted.
Brendan, it's you. That's right. Tell me, well, and Victoria too. We'll start on the producing team. Do you come from a background of theater, either of you, or did you wake up one morning? A little bit about that. How did you get involved in this? Where did you get the disease?
Our folks were very, very, very much involved in community theater, and had produced when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, before Victoria was actually born. I produced Guys and Dolls in summer in community theater, and Bells Are Ringing, and I worked the light board and was an usher and all that. Got bit with the bug then, and then when I was in high school, I actually sold. I had a company called the Troubadour Theater, and I had 8 kids in a van, and we traveled around to summer camps with sleeping bags, and I sold the Guys and Dolls, the Fantastics, and Damn Yankees to the summer camps as a form of entertainment rather than taking the kids to a local movie or whatever. And we actually had a wonderful time. I did that for 3 years, and that's how I earned enough money to go to college. It was very profitable on a risk-reward basis. It was very, very good. And we played 3 years, and one summer we actually did 54 shows in 60 days. It was also non-union. But that's how I got started, and that led to the summer theater. And then I spent some time in England working in all the regional theaters in England, directing and learning how to produce. And then I came back to the States and started actively producing. The first success, if you will, that I had was in 1978, and where I met Robert, who represented me on a Harvey Fierstein play, Off-Broadway.
Uh-huh. Well,
it's really the equivalent of selling newspapers, starting
sure
out.
Is,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's how you get started.
What were you looking for in England?
I was at that time I was very interested in directing, and I wanted to go and well, I actually had a girlfriend in England. That's the real reason. But I wanted to work.
And what did you sell her? You sold her something. I know you sold her something.
I definitely sold her a bill of goods. So I spent a lot of time working at the regional theaters and working as assistant directors, as an assistant director.
But then you passed through directing to become a producer, or are you still a director?
Well, I have directed a couple of things here in New York. We won't talk about one of them. One of them we could talk about. And I just found that my strengths were in putting the project together and not really in working so directly with the actors. And I enjoyed the process from beginning to end and the challenge of creating all the work and really being responsible for all of the decisions. And also I found it to be an easier way to get into the theater professionally because I could create my own work. By being a producer, I could say, I'm going to do this, and I did it, rather than saying somebody has to employ me, which was really not my nature. And then when I actually did start directing, I directed in England, and we had a success and brought the show over here to the Minetta Lane Theater in 1986, and Peter was the press agent on it.
But now getting into Damn Yankees, let's see where each one fits in and when they came on board, starting with.
Well,
Brendan, do you want to take this
Well, I was
to Charlotte?
I think that's a very good question.
Yeah.
But who was the first person? Well, obviously your sister, Victoria, had to be in at the very beginning.
on Damn Yankees?
Yeah, they were talking about the production, just the Damn Yankees, when you start putting together the whole group of people. But you've already been working with how many of this group? All of them?
Well, Charlotte is the first person, the only member of this panel that had not done a project with us before. We had worked with Rick before at Sereno, and Robert has represented us for 13, 14 years. I know it seems like 100. Peter has been working with us since the mid-'80s, and Victoria has been working with us for me forever. And then Charlotte joined the team in Damn Yankees in, I guess, May or June of '92.
What was the team when she joined it? When you say join the team of Damn Yankees?
Well,
what was it then?
We decided to option Damn Yankees, I guess, in November of '91, where we made our first inquiries to the whether the rights were available. We approached George Abbott's representatives, and we optioned.
That would be Robert's start.
I guess one of the stories that's good about that is you said that you gave up baseball in '27. George Abbott's attorney, which is Mr. Colton, one of the scions in our industry, has represented Mr. Abbott continuously since 1928. Okay, and he's 89 years old. And so our first contacts with trying to obtain the rights were actually with him, who represents the owners. Of course, some of them are estates. Mr. Abbott has refused to let it be an estate, as he still owns it and still controls it. And that was Mitchell's dream, is to say, how do we get this on?
Well, what is the process when you did that? I mean, you pick up the phone. I think everyone would like to know what do you do apart from saying we want to do Damn Yankees.
It's actually
just the whole process of what an attorney does in terms of getting the rights, etc.
Attorneys are always responsive. Mitchell starts at first. He wants to do it. He actually contacted Mr. Abbott's representatives, but I happen to know Mr. Colton for many years. His next call is to his lawyer. I represent him on all the projects. Spoke to Ed about the availability of the rights of doing this revival in New York City. At the time, there were other people interested in it, and we had to present our credentials as to why this package was better than any others, and they made that the election of going forward with us.
What were those credentials? What did you have to present? I mean,
well, in terms of credentials, we're talking about the skills that Mitchell brings to the table of how he wanted this project to go forward, his dreams, Because anytime you're doing a production, the dreams that you see on the stage really are broken down to a lot of different people. The authors, and here we had authors who are still alive. Okay, the director who eventually is brought on board. But the person who orchestrates it, as Mitchell was just talking about, is the producer. He's going to have to raise the money, and to raise money you have to have a dream you can sell, that you can give to people in a fashion that can understand why this deserves an investment. And that's a hard thing to do. I think when I first met Mitchell, I gave him an anecdote that was given to me years ago when I first started as an attorney in the theater business. A producer was sitting with me who will remain nameless, and he said finding creative people in the theater was very difficult. And I, being very young at the time, said, yes, the artists, the director, the writers, impossible. He says, nah, they're technical. Creative is raising the money. And it is hard to do because that's truly a dream. Think about what you're selling. Something that's just going to be an image that isn't created just on paper. That's what we sell. That's what we were able to do.
That would have been Mr. Colton's first question, wouldn't it have been?
It was.
Where are you going to get the money, or how do you get the money, or have you got the money?
And the first question is not have you, because they know it takes a long time. But Mitchell and I, over the period of time that we negotiated, which was, I guess, from November to May before we actually had a contract, that's May of 1992, from November of 1991, had come up with a way of doing this that was somewhat different in terms of bringing in a regional theater that could let us develop this old play into a modern version of that old play without violating any of its basic tenets. It happens to be a theater that I represent, and if they were not in California, I'm sure that Tom Hall, who's the managing director of the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, would be here because he and Mitchell were able to share the producer's dream and then bring in their artistic director, which was Jack O'Brien, to give it life. And when we did that, we were able to then show the underlying rights owners that we had a two-level structure that would give a great deal of weight and life to an old show.
Two-level structure, explain that a little bit.
Well, we were going to do this show first at a regional theater that has a great deal of credentials, the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. It was going to be directed by Jack O'Brien. I don't know when we brought Rob Marshall into the package.
Much, much later, because we weren't really sure.
Did you have your capital then? Did you raise money when you thought of Jack O'Brien and going to the regional theater? How far along were you with capital?
Package first is to have enough front money to do all of this so you're not reaching into your own pocket. But then we actually created a double-level financing structure to do this.
In getting the rights, did Mr. Abbott want to know whether you had enough capital?
No, he was willing to rely on Mr. Maxwell's abilities. That's one of the things that you're actually selling. Because to put the money away before the rights is impossible. In fact, you must have the rights in place. And what Mitchell and I were able to formulate was a way of raising a significantly smaller amount of money that would be needed to do the show directly on Broadway to enhance the production at the Globe. Their production is their own, and their own artistic creation with Mitchell's input. Because unless it was going to be something that he wanted to bring to New York, it wouldn't be viable.
And the Old Globe didn't have any money for this.
Well, since they produce 13 shows a year and have a very large budget, they would have enough money to do this show, which they wanted to do in their own on their own agenda, to do a show much smaller than that which would have shown us something warranting the move. So our offer to them, as has been done in a lot of projects, was to enhance their budget, to allow the show to be done in a fashion that you could see the value from moving it.
And they have a very high reputation, the Old Globe.
And Jack has done a terrific job, and they're really wonderful
director,
people. And Into the Woods was done this way years before this, and done creatively as well, Mr. Sondheim.
What about Charlotte, then? You're at the theater.
Well, it's actually before then, because that's when we start doing those budgets that we bring in the general manager to tell us, gee, how many dollars are we really going to need?
When I came into the project, Mitchell and Robert had already begun negotiations with the director, with the choreographer, with the star, and they were well on the way with the Globe. So at that point, we had to have a series of meetings with the Globe to find out what they were planning so that we could then determine what we needed to add to their production, and then on top of that, do a full-scale Broadway budget.
Now, Charlotte, when you say a full, and I understand a full-scale Broadway budget, which of course, I understand. There are two questions and two things. Do you negotiate with the unions in terms of how many men in the cases? That's one question. And also, how do you train to be a general manager? You can go in that order.
Well, the second one I'll start first with. I started out as a receptionist in a general manager's office and spent years learning the business and putting in long hours and working. And the only way to train is experience. When I started, you couldn't go to college to learn any management courses. I don't think there were any at that time. Now you have them everywhere. And they're certainly valuable and helpful. And then after you finish them, you still have to go to a manager's office and work. The budgeting process and the negotiating process, usually you do the budgeting first with an idea of what the negotiating will involve, because that's the only way you can budget. Then the reality of what each item costs varies slightly once you actually start those negotiations. You don't get into numbers of people, etc., except in terms of your cast specifically, because you don't know what your physical production is going to be until you get there. And that determines the number of people you use.
But the size of the production in the Old Globe would be bound to be smaller just in physical terms with the stage and everything compared to Broadway. So does the designer, so you have to bring a designer in very early, I would think, to say we're going to have two different physical production.
The physical production of the Globe was designed sort of to be, by analogy, it was the suit that you buy, and it was the foundation, and then as we moved to New York, we added the haberdashery. We added the tie and the shirt and the pocket square, and we dressed it all up, and we made it Broadway worthy. And we designed everything and budgeted everything that it was, we added to what we had at the Globe. We didn't really throw anything out. And that enabled us to finance the show in a two-tier way, where we committed $700,000 to the enhancement money at the Globe, but really captured a great deal more value than the $700,000 as we went forward, which enabled Damn Yankees to be on Broadway for a number that we're very proud of, for a number that is far less than the average musical is hitting Broadway today.
Can you tell us what that is?
Or not?
I have no problem with that. Do I have a problem with that?
Absolutely not. You should be proud of it.
Damn Yankees came in for about $3.4 million.
And the norm is what, Charlotte?
I would say now they're going $5 to $10 million.
Right, indeed. Also,
That's wonderful.
Is the next step is Peter, and then over to you, Rick.
Which comes first?
Yeah, public
Peter
relations
or
or
Rick?
advertising.
I think most probably I came onto the team next in about, I guess, May of '93. I got a call from Charlotte saying that the Maxwells wanted me to work with them on Damn Yankees, and I, without a moment's notice, said yes, I would be more than happy to. And then we announced the show in the New York Times that June. We wanted to do that before everyone went away for the summer so that people could learn about the project happening at the Old Globe. Their performances began in September.
Well, how did you say you announced it in the Times? You didn't take an ad. Did you call up somebody? How do you do that? What goes on?
We put all the information together in an announcement release, and I sent that over to at that point it was Glenn Collins who was writing the Friday theater column. And then he did a terrific feature for us.
And did you feature George Abbott?
Oh, most definitely. And actually, I believe it came out on his 106th birthday, which was about June 25, which I think is just about right.
Perfect.
Because he's a fortunate addition to the whole thing.
Oh, most definitely.
George Abbott is a saintly figure in newspaper publicity as well as other ways.
Part of the reason that one of the reasons we went to the Globe, away from the financial rewards of it, and the fact that we could work on the show out of town without the hot lights of New York and the pressures of New York, was that we did not want to do the original production of Damn Yankees. And in very complex negotiations with Ed Colton that Robert oversaw for us, we developed a situation in which we got the right, which is very unusual, to do whatever work we wanted to do on the book and the structure of the show and the change of the order of the songs, and we actually gave songs to different characters. We added a lot of material, we excised a lot of material, and we had an understanding with Mr. Abbott and Mr. Adler, who wrote the score, that we could do really whatever we wanted to do in San Diego, and to show what we had in mind. And then they would see the show in San Diego and either disapprove or approve those changes. Our position always was that they were going to approve the changes, and we sort of said, let the torpedoes go and just do what we thought was the way to bring the show into the 90s. And we were fortunate enough that they loved the show in San Diego. I'm not sure they loved everything that we did, because it was change, and change is often difficult. But we had a meeting following the opening night in San Diego at Mr. Abbott's suite in San Diego.
The opening night where?
In San Diego. It with Mr. Abbott in San Diego at his suite. And he said something to the effect of, you have a big success, you have a big hit, it's not what I would have done, but who can argue with a hit? And as we progressed to go over line by line, note by note, we stayed with his adage, which was, if it gets a laugh, keep it. So that came back to help us when we were discussing, or for want of a better word, arguing about some of the things in New York. We constantly said to Mr. Abbott, well, you said, if it gets a laugh, keep it. So there are several things in the show that he wasn't particularly wild about that get a big laugh that stay in the show.
What's the original date of Damn Yankees in New York?
It opened in 1955.
So it's quite a long... It's
38 years ago.
38 years. God, that's a long time.
Yes. And 90% of the material in Damn Yankees, other than the structure and the story, is really markedly different than what we started with when we went to work in November of '91.
Including the fact that there are no more, Brendan, you wouldn't know this, but there are no more Washington senators either. that goes out.
Fill me in.
Yeah, right. But Rick, then, okay, now you are called in, obviously, to do, I assume, by Charlotte, right?
Was it you who called?
Can't remember.
It was the summer of '93.
Right. And you have Damn Yankees, and what do you, given that, now you've got to advertise it, promote it, give us an insight into your, your mindset. What do you do in terms of knowing
What's
the
the
show?
difference between advertising and publicity?
Right. And how are you going to promote it? What do you glom on?
Advertising is space that you pay for in various media, print, outdoor, broadcast media. It is also space that you can barter for. You can trade tickets for space or for airtime. And publicity is, through Peter's good offices, getting as much free space as you possibly can. So the advertising budget of any show is a substantial part of the weekly operating cost of that show. And with Damn Yankees, we had sort of a luxurious situation, which was that there was an extant production that we were able to see long before the show was going to come to New York, in San Diego, and sort of get juiced up about it. And then to find what it is about this particular production, as in anything that one advertises, you try to find what is to find and then exploit what is most compelling about that, in order to sell it to as many people as possible, to as wide a range of, in this case, theater goers as possible. And something that we wanted to do was make clear through the expression of the show in advertising that this was a contemporary look at a classic Broadway musical, that it should not be considered a revival in the way that we used to think of as revivals before. People used to reconceive shows. You can think of successful revivals like Guys and Dolls, Carousel, Damn Yankees, on Broadway now, which
Really
have taken something wonderful and reinvented it, put a different spin on it to make it appealing both to an audience that would remember it from when it appeared originally, and to the people who are going to the theater today, a younger audience. Hopefully, with this show, we always wanted to attract a wider audience, an audience that for whom baseball had some appeal, as well as the traditional appeal of Broadway musical comedy. But it was musical comedy that was really the niche here. In a rather crowded season last year, Damn Yankees found itself, in many cases, head-to-head with an excellent production of Carousel at Lincoln Center. Carousel and Damn Yankees were opening at about the same time, and therefore we had to attract as much a part of the theater-going and audience as we possibly could away from that show and to this show. And the primary way that we chose to do that was to focus on the fact that Damn Yankees is a musical comedy. If you stand out on the TKTS line or in front of a theater at 7:30 and ask people what it is that they primarily want to see when they go to the theater, musical comedy is the first choice of most people. Musical comedy, therefore, we had to exploit. Carousel does not fall into that category. we wanted to make it very, very clear that Damn Yankees was the show to see if you wanted to have a great time. And it was also a show that was something that, since the primary ticket buyers are women, this is something that you might drag your husband to, but at the end he would be glad that he came along. And that's not...
Why do you say that Carousel was not the natural rival as a musical comedy?
Well, it just happened to be the way the calendar fell. They were coming in at about the same time. They were both major revivals of great Broadway shows. Carousel had the added advantage of having received tremendous amount of critical acclaim the year before when it was playing in London. It had the imprimatur of Cameron McIntosh and Lincoln Center. It appeared to be the press's darling at the outset of the season, and it was our job and Peter's job to both differentiate and maximize the appeal of Damn Yankees, which...
One of the things, excuse me, I'm sorry. One of the things you also have to do as soon as the advertising begins is to be sure what your graphics are going to be, your logo, and all that. Now,
sure.
Now, how early? Who
well,
gets into that? All of you
what
get
made
together
you
on that?
come to that? How did you...
Well, the original image of Damn Yankees was I believe Gwen Verdon sort of standing arms akimbo and legs spread in her little whatever Lola wants. What would you call that? A bustier. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Isabel. And we didn't want to do anything that would be that exploitative with a show for in 1994. And also, what we did was we talked to people. We brought people up for random interviews and talked to them about the show. And when asked to describe the show,
what people?
We would stop. We regularly bring people up from our offices are on Broadway. We regularly bring people up with the promise of donuts and coffee to talk about the theater and why they're interested in seeing what they're seeing, what it is about an ad that appeals to them. You know, it's test marketing in an ad hoc, rather unscientific way, but we do get to learn for a low expenditure what people who go to the theater are expecting and what they're taking away with them, which helps us go out.
So in that way, the window card and the logo was born?
What people were describing about Damn Yankees was a Faustian bargain between a man who sells his soul to the devil to become a young baseball player. The character of Lola doesn't really quite fit into that précis. You have to get into a much longer conversation about Lola, who in this case was also the marquee name, B.B. Newworth, in the show, in order to make sense of that aspect. So we decided we wanted to reduce the aspect of the Lola character and represent her merely as a pair of lips on the baseball, and the Damn Yankees title sort of arcing around it in a way that is reminiscent of the architecture at Yankee Stadium. The lips, I can tell you, in that sort of trivia way that in years to come when people watch this broadcast, they may want to know that the lips do belong to someone on this panel. And she's free to raise her hand if she so chooses.
I knew it immediately.
So did I. We all did that. I'd like to bring that up because now that we're
Is that when you first came into it, when they wanted your lips?
No, actually, I was at the meeting, and I think I just had the most neatly applied lipstick that day.
She did win out over a great many.
There were a great number of lips.
It was quite a competition going.
Beyond that, although that says, I wanted to ask.
We now have everybody in place, and we're up to your logo and your window cards.
Yes.
You haven't opened on Broadway.
Let me add one other thing that Damn Yankees had, which is really, really wonderful. There's an old expression in advertising: you can't hum the announcer. What Damn Yankees had as sort of its flagship number and was tremendously exploitable through advertising is the song "Heart." It's a song that everybody in this country knows on some level. And it is a song that, because it's in the show, we are able to use in the advertising for that show without having to pay the $1 billion you'd have to pay if you were Stovers and you wanted to use it for stovetop stuffing. So we were able to have the most wonderful jingle in the world. In advertising, it's called jingles. You know, on stage, it's called showstoppers. But it's the thing that gets people singing along in their cars or at home or while they're in front of the television, and it's great because what it does is there's a carryover. So long after the commercial is over, somebody still has that song caught in their head, and then it begins to act like a 1-2 punch. The next time they see the ad or the next time they see the poster, they think, that's right, that's what I'm interested in seeing.
there's something else I wanted to add about the artwork, too, is that now, in the 1990s, all shows, Broadway shows, do merchandising, and we wanted to choose a graphic image that was simple, an icon that could be put on T-shirts and jackets and baseball caps and keychains, and something that would really translate to a variety of media. So we went with this simple image that has worked beautifully on baseball hats and
Victoria
posters.
does not get a royalty.
I don't. You know, and I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
You're getting bitterer and bitterer.
I really am.
But now, who chooses the artist? Is it done in your in-house?
This particular image was done at our shop. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends. The same way you wouldn't necessarily, wear a tuxedo to a greasy spoon. You wouldn't necessarily go to the same artist regardless of what the production was.
Right.
So you try to find somebody whose particular skills fit the project.
Then who makes a decision about targeting your advertising? How much media, how much television, how much radio?
We have many meetings to decide how the money is apportioned, and Mitchell, Victoria, and their partners came with some tremendous deals in place for barter and trade, which involved TDI. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, we made a landmark deal on this show. Actually, we were partners with a company called TDI, which is Transportation Displays Incorporated, and they own outdoor media and some cable television time and some radio time. We made a purchase of $100,000 of outdoor advertising space, and they in turn made a $100,000 investment in the production. Then for participation on the general partner side of the limited partnership, they gave us $400,000 worth of free advertising space. That consisted of outdoor billboards, the sides of buses, was it? Sides of buses, and some television and radio time. It was cable television on Manhattan Cable.
Is that an unusual arrangement?
Well, to put that in context, it was a landmark arrangement.
It was a landmark
and to put it in
arrangement.
context, a pre-opening budget for a Broadway musical it would rarely exceed $750,000. So you're talking about $400,000 of that, $100,000 plus another $400,000 that could be used toward that figure. It's just it's another example of good producing on their part to be able to keep the costs to the show down by finding ways to increase the budget without necessarily paying for it yourself.
So they were gambling on getting their money back over a period of several years.
That's right.
Yes, they were. They were also, I think, part of the relationship which Victoria helped forge was really about their desire to, for want of a better expression, give back to an industry that feeds their industry. And it really was an opportunity because of the musical comedy aspects, the family aspects of this show, that all of their clients, all of their buyers, this was a great piece of work for them to be involved with, for them to sort of, puff their chest out and say, we were responsible for this to some degree. We also were able to, because Damn Yankees was such a famous title, and it does have baseball so much in its story, and Damn Yankees is not a story about baseball per se, it's a story about passion and love. Baseball is just a conduit to that. We were able to forge relationships that were very unique in our advertising with Madison Square Garden Network, who broadcast the Yankees, and we were also able to make a deal with Topps Baseball trading cards.
Now, who cooked that idea up? Because it's a brilliant idea to deal with MSG and all that.
Well, we all sort of cooked it up. We all sat around and we said, all right, where do we take these ideas? Where do we take the givens of this geometry problem, baseball and musical comedy, and how do we reach a different market? And it was just a marriage of ideas between MSG, which broadcast the Yankees and was broadcasting the Knicks at the time. We traded tickets. We made a relationship where they were involved with the production. They gave us some television time. We then made the relationship with Topps Trading Cards, which they printed up a beautiful, I wish we had them here, but they printed up a beautiful set of 20 Broadway trading cards, which are really patterned after baseball cards. And I was just yesterday that Peter set up, I was at the New York City Public Schools with Charlotte Wilcox, who's now playing Lola, using these baseball cards to introduce young people to the theater. And we went to a public school and we gave out all the baseball cards, and all of a sudden this musical, which these kids have never seen, came alive in baseball cards, which they are used to relating to.
That's a wonderful idea.
I have something.
That's very, I love
I have some visual aids.
It's
not the baseball card, but it's an application of the baseball card idea in advertising, which is an example of why it was a good idea, because when ideas can expand out and serve several masters, that's when they are really effective in the selling of the show. And before the Tony nominations, the Tony Awards, as Isabel said, of course, are given out for excellence, but we cannot deny, we who must market the theater, cannot deny the impact that the Tony Awards have at the box office.
Economically, I know.
And it's our job to try, therefore, to do whatever we can to garner as many nominations for any particular production as that production could possibly get. And it was our best guess that that because of the crowded category of musicals and musical revivals in the '94 Tonys, that every nomination would really be hotly contested. And so what we wanted to do was, prior to the nominations coming out, campaign for them in a way that oftentimes in Variety you'll see a film campaigning for an Oscar nomination for your consideration. Came up with a for your consideration kind of concept for Damn Yankees, which made use of the baseball card idea and tried to position anyone who could conceivably be nominated for a Tony Award for this production of Damn Yankees was featured both picture-wise and the back of the card. Instead of, we used the stats. The stats in this case were the rave reviews that the individual had received at the opening of the show. This ran the day before the Tony nominations were announced. So we hoped not only would it have impact at the box office, but it would also be the last thing that the Tony nominators would see as they went into their room to decide who would be nominated.
Hopelessly suggestible group of people.
I would agree with you, Brendan, entirely about that.
It couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt was the theory. And even if it had no impact on the nominators, it would enable us to use a number 10 here when a week later we knew that people were going to be using numbers of their own because they would have their nominations.
It's still an awfully good ad.
It was also a good early use of color in the New York Times, which finally sort of got hip to the idea that every paper in the country had color except the New York Times.
How much more does that cost you in color?
It costs, it depends the size of the ad. A full-page ad is a 12% surcharge. Smaller sizes go up to about 20% above the cost of black and white.
And what does that cost, then, bottom line? What is it?
That ad costs $60,000.
This is a $60,000 ad.
So when you take into consideration the $400,000 we got from TDI, which is still out there on the highway and on the buses and the phones and the train platforms, it was quite an arrangement that we were fortunate enough to make.
Beyond that, it's an arrangement that the company didn't pay for. As Victoria said, this was something that the producers thought was important, and they paid for it out of their participation in the show with no effect on their investors. Because if you take a look at it, $400,000 is better than 10% of the budget of the show.
Yeah,
it's one of the reasons why the show was able to cost $3.4. We got that $400,000 without actually paying for it.
Sure. I wanted to pick up Peter a little bit. Now that the show is open and it's running, and you have obviously you interact with Rick, but isn't your job now really to keep this going, and how do you do that? And I mean, when we say PR, that's to a lot of people kind of a, what is that? I mean, what is PR? And you might go in, and how, because I assume one of your major jobs is to keep this in front of the public, is that correct?
Definitely.
And if so, how? Because once it's open, it's gotten the reviews.
He doesn't have to talk now.
I think from the very start, we wanted all the publicity associated with the show to be fun, because we knew the show was very fun. So from the moment that the marquee went up with the world's largest illuminated ball, baseball,
which we got Rawlings Baseball Company to pay for.
Right. We had, television cameras there when this ball was dropped into place in Times Square. We just have explored many different fun things associated with the show to explore through different forms of media. I mean, from the ball to our relationship with opening the Yankees game, the season game, to with the baseball season being canceled this year, how we reacted to it. I mean, that's like one of the funniest stories, and that Mitchell called and said, they've canceled the season, what can we do? So, as I know everyone knows on this panel, that the dimming of the marquee lights on Broadway is usually reserved for when dignitaries of the theater pass away. we made it Broadway's baseball's darkest hour, and we had our marquees dim that night, and brought the baseball players out and put their caps over their hearts. And we had no less than about 12 television crews, and this went across the country. It's these type of things that we do constantly to keep the show out there.
One of the best things that Peter arranged, and it was really so much out of another time, was through actually my mother, who sells group tickets on Broadway. One of her clients wished to ask his future fiancée to marry her. So Peter arranged the whole thing at a matinee over the summer, in which Vicki Lewis, who played the reporter in the show, stepped forward after the curtain call and said she had a hot story right off the press, and said, "Is this young lady in the house?" And the woman stood up, and Vicki said, "You better sit down." And she said, "This gentleman, I don't recall his name now, would like to know if you'd marry him." And there were 1,500, we were sold out, we were 1,500 people there, and they all sort of went, "Oh." And it was really just using, it was really fun, and everybody in the audience talked about it. We got really dozens of letters about that they were participating in something so special.
And that television coverage hit about 43 markets across the country.
Oh, God.
So it's just amazing how that, can impact.
Now, your mother sells tickets. What does your grandmother do?
She sells my mother.
But I remember I was at opening day at Yankee Stadium. It was brilliant because I suddenly thought, wow, what a very good marketing thing, because you had the chorus dancing on top of the Yankee dugout.
That's right.
Which was, and there you had, 65,000 people, knowing it was the chorus, and then obviously the scoreboard had the whole thing, which I didn't know that it was you, but I was thinking, boy, that marketing is really good.
But in that regard, it's the good time that is the special effect, as it were, or the spectacle of Damn Yankees, in the way that the big shows have become about special effects like helicopters or chandeliers or tires going up to heaven or big showboats coming out on stage, that sort of thing. The special effect of Damn Yankees is the great fun of the production, and the audience genuinely has a good time. Sometimes that's just puff when you hear that about a show. The audience comes out of the theater having had a terrific time, and that is a special effect that you can transport around to places like Yankee Stadium or the Thanksgiving Day Parade without losing anything, because it's kind of contagious.
Let me take one step back. Where did you get your money from?
Where did we get our money from? I called up all those people who bought stock when I was in college. No, it's actually some of them did invest. We have 178 investors in Damn Yankees, which is more than I think any show on Broadway. We orchestrated the financing of the project in a twofold way. One of the things I wanted to do first was bring in a major backer, a major investor, and we went and we made an arrangement with Polygram Diversified Entertainment, which is the 6th largest entertainment company in the world, and we got them to commit 25% of the budget. And once we had that 25%, we sort of had the anchor in place, a foundation to go and raise the rest of the money from 177 other investors. Most of our investors in the show are $10,000 to $25,000 investors. We also tried to do something which I'm very pleased that we were able to accomplish, is I felt, one of the reasons that I optioned this play was that there was an article in the New York Times, away from the fact that I wanted to do it and had an affinity for it personally, and I like what it has to say in the 90s, even though it was written in the 50s, there was an article in the New York Times several years ago about Nick and Nora, and how Nick and Nora had become such a debacle. And many of the people interviewed in that article were people of, fortunately, of great means, of great wealth. And I took a sort of a personal affront to the fact that it takes more to produce a Broadway musical than great wealth. You have to have passion, you have to have taste, you have to have some sort of vision. And I decided, after conversations with Victoria and then with Robert, that what we were going to do is we were going to bring in what we thought would be the next generation of Broadway producers who, although the numbers have become so staggering, we felt if we could find 6 or 8 partners who would each commit 10% of the budget, which was a workable number, that we could partner this thing and deliver a show on Broadway without spending $10 million and without having shopping centers to back us up. And we were fortunate enough to do that. So we began that process by saying to people, look, why don't you invest some money in the development and enhancement in San Diego? And we used the expression that you got a cheap look at the whole card. You got to see what you were going to invest in New York, before you put up all your money. So we were fortunate enough to make alliances with six people who have now become partners on all of our projects because it all worked out so well.
Had they been before, or they came on?
Basically, two of them were very, very small partners of mine when I did a play off-Broadway at the Orpheum Theater called Oleana. And the investment there was very, very small. And two of them had worked on that with me. And four...
What do investors expect to get? A profit, or being the fun and glamour of being in the theater?
Well, I think Polygram Diversified Entertainment would expect a profit.
Would like a profit.
I also think that everybody would like a profit. I don't think that anybody puts up $25,000, no matter how well-to-do you are, and says, you know, fine, lose my money.
So therefore it's on your record that you're getting this kind of money?
Yeah, I mean, your track record or your ability to raise money in the future is if you've had a success in the past or successes, it is easier to raise money. But I do think that there are a great many people who are interested in the theater who are very willing to invest their money, and we know this is a difficult investment, invest their money, and as long as you deliver something that makes them proud and makes them glad that they were participating, they'll come back. They may not come back 10 times, but they'll come back 2 or 3 times.
How far is this now? The show is virtually almost in a year. Is it beginning to pay back now with that?
The show has paid back a good portion of its investment. We opened on March 3rd, and it's now almost November, so we've been running about 8 or 9 months. And we've paid back a good portion of the investment, and business is very brisk through the end of the year. And we think we're very, I'm very sanguine that by shortly after the show runs a year, with the revenue from New York and the revenue from the road, the show will show a nice profit.
One thing I forgot to ask way at the beginning, and you'll tell us where that comes in, the choice of the theater.
Well, in our case, we had no theater. I mean, we said we had numerous discussions where we're going to put this show, and this was something that Charlotte really had to deal with, which she can talk about in terms of you design a set for a specific theater. So she was up against keeping our options open. And we wouldn't have had a theater except for the demise of a show that never came in, and which was announced for the marquee, right. And it then shut down out of town. It didn't come in, and we really had about 4 days to
begin looking at theaters and trying to make deals with theater owners.
Yeah, Charlotte, why don't you talk about it?
It's very hard to make a concrete deal with a theater owner as far ahead as we were. I came on board in the spring of '92. We weren't actually going to open until the late winter of '94. So you can speak to theater owners and you can get them excited and they'll put you in line. But they don't want to commit that early because they don't know if you're really going to happen and they can't tie their real estate up. Our designer had designed for the L'Enfantin Theater. And when we were getting ready to come in, it clearly wasn't going to be available. We had a lot of theaters that we were juggling. There was a period where I'd make 4 and 5 calls a day to the general managers of the different theater chains to find out, well, what will happen if this doesn't happen, or if this does happen. And then all of a sudden, literally in about 4 days, Paper Moon canceled, and we knew we had our chance, and we knew we could fit into that theater. We went to Jimmy Needlelander and made it happen.
Can you tell us what the usual arrangements are with the theater?
In terms of finances, every theater will, right off the bat, charge you for their payroll package, which is the stagehands, the box office, the ushers, the porters, the ticket takers, the theater manager, the doormen. And whatever that cost is for your show, you pay 100% of. Then they also will get a rent factor out of which they pay their real estate taxes and all of their overhead. They'll also charge you specific figures for things like insurance, garbage collection, the security people that take your money back and forth from the box office. And then they'll want some kind of a percentage that goes from $1 or a certain dollar figure to be negotiated as their profit. We were able to negotiate a very wonderful deal on the marquee because they were in a bind. They had a show that canceled and they needed to fill their real estate, and we just happened to be there at the right time, so it was fortunate for both of us.
How was that as a stage? Excuse me. How was that as a stage in terms of the width of the stage and everything?
I think it's a beautiful theater.
Excellent.
It's a beautiful theater, and it actually shows off our show very well because the theater is very modern and our show is very kitsch in a 50s kind of way. So the show looks beautiful in the theater, even though it wasn't really designed for a modern theater.
The design team was nervous about the fact that it was a modern theater, and in their mind, a large theater as opposed to a small, intimate theater. Plus, the senior designer had done Nick and Nora in that theater, so he was psychologically not prepared to go back. But he ended up loving it.
Breakdown of the budget, can you say, of what you're starting with your theater package? So you give us some kind of a breakdown of your
weekly
budget,
or
how
the
you allocate.
production budget?
Well, I would think let's do weekly too. What does it cost a week, and how does it go bringing it in? I mean, both. You have
So that we
the
finally
production
get to
and
the
then the
ticket
final.
price,
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
It costs between $360 and $380 a week, depending on how much we spend on advertising and marketing in any
Add
given
thousands to
moment. But yeah.
Yes, okay, 380,000. Well, how does that break down in terms of let's say, artistic salaries, crew, and advertising?
Boy, can I have so many shows in my head, can I actually remember the specifics of each one? You remember them.
The salaries on Damn Yankees are about $104,000 a week, depending on what we gross, because the star percentages escalate that. The theater rent package, with all the things that Charlotte's talked about, comes down to about $125,000 a week. We've spent as much as $80,000 a week in advertising and as little as $25,000.
Right.
Then there are royalties, which the minimum royalties to all of the creative people are $24,750, and those increase depending on the grosses. And then there are rentals of sound and lights and so forth and so on, which are about $40,000. And in the number that we pay to the theater are the crew costs, the people who take care of the costumes and so forth. And then there's miscellaneous expenses of cleaning the costumes and maintaining them and putting new people into the show. When somebody leaves, we have to rehearse new people, rebuilding costumes, and then there's about $1.50 a week for the producers.
I can see the tears. You know, Victoria, did you? Because I can see when you were talking about the Rawlings Baseball Company. Do you do a lot of this negotiating, or is it?
Well, I did on this show. It seemed. I think that doing musicals on Broadway in today's times, there's such competition for the entertainment dollar that you have to try to get your show out there in as many different mediums as possible, and in places where you wouldn't expect to read about it. Like the Topps baseball cards was a perfect example, because it brought the show into the attention of people who might not normally read the Broadway show pages.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you right now, because you've got the show out there, and we have to just take a break. And then we're coming right back to talk about what happens now that the show is out there and what you've done. So stand up, stretch, move around, whatever you do, and come right back again, and we'll get to all the questions that we want to ask. You have really been most informative. This is a seminar on Damn Yankees that we're talking about.
Can you repeat?
This is CUNY TV, Channel 75.
We're continuing the American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater, which is coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And we've been talking about the production of Damn Yankees, that wonderful show that's playing on Broadway now. We have the team, the whole producing team, and we've been picking their brains as to what it is and how it is to produce a hit play. We're going to continue right now with George White and Brendan Gill, and I think we've come almost up to the cost of the ticket. Shall we go on with that, or do we still have something
there was
to go
one
before?
thing as well we did at the break, which I thought was sort of fascinating, because it relates to the legal changes of something. It has to do with promotion. It's something Victoria told me about at the break, which I think would be fun to share about the novel. And then we'll get on to the price of the tickets, because I think this is it's fun to see. It's a brilliant idea to promote it and how these things can keep a show going.
Well, it's just another example of cross-promotion that we did on the show, but the musical Damn Yankees is based on a book, I think it was written in 1953, called The Year the Yankees Lost the Pennant, and the book had been out of print for the longest time, and about 3 weeks before the show opened, we got a call from the original publishers, W.W. Norton, and they said that in light of the fact that the musical was reopening on Broadway and there was all this attention focused on it, that they wanted to reissue the novel, but they wanted to reissue it under the title Damn Yankees with their famous baseball lip print artwork. So we had to go to the estate and request their permission, it's Mr. Adler, Mr. Abbott, and the estates of Douglas Wallop, to to get their permission to retitle the book, and then, of course, we had to get permission from Rick Elice to use the artwork on the cover of the book. But it was.
Did I give it?
Yes, you did. But it was great because once the book was reissued, and with this new artwork, the publishing company had it in the window of every bookstore because it was a big deal for them, and they gave us 2,000 copies of the book to use for various cross promotions. So it was just another way for us to get our artwork and the name of the show out there in a different medium.
And in addition to that, we were able to negotiate with the publisher where we mentioned that the book is in print in our ads. They actually paid for some of our advertising. So we were able to, what you see, records available on such and such at the bottom of ads. They were kind enough to pay for some of our advertising as long as we mentioned that the book was republished in our ads in small print. So we got additional advertising that the production didn't actually pay for.
Who, from a legal point of view, when you were looking up the genealogy of the original thing, somebody at the Yankees had to give permission at the ball club for the use of the name Yankees.
Why?
Wouldn't they have to, or are they in the public domain?
Well, it's not in the public domain, but you're talking about them as to what they are, and you can actually use it. You can't use their logo without their permission, and we don't.
Yeah.
I think we would have gotten permission if we had wanted to.
Isn't
it wasn't
that
a
on
choice.
some of the, isn't it on some of the T-shirts? Isn't the NY on it, or is that a variation on it?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's a DY.
It's a DY for Damn
Oh, right,
Yankees.
of course. Of
Okay,
course.
see,
That's
that's Damn Yankees. But no, in other words, just the way the author was able to write the book, okay, the year the Yankees lost the pennant, he was using, it's called fair use under the copyright laws, because he's referring to them as a baseball team. He's not trying to capitalize on them, and he's not trying to advertise off of them. And that's, in effect, what we're doing here. Creative work is allowed that in lots of different ways in the copyright law.
But you think in the 50s to say damn Yankees would have had a pejorative effect.
I'm sure that George now is very happy that they refer to that way, to tell the truth. So, but I don't know the 50s very well because I just was cheering the Dodgers. So
Is there a different financial arrangement with an estate than to an author and royalties? And
you end up
rights?
having different problems in terms of dealing with the negotiations. And one of the great things, and Mitchell, though he went over it, the ability to allow people to make changes is very hard to get. And strangely enough, estates are less likely to allow you to make changes than a live author. Here we did have Mr. Abbott alive, and he was very aware and saw a lot of shows.
But are the
and a lot of
royalties
copies.
any different in payment than...
No, except that you sometimes have different groups to get paid. We actually refer to our authors in this place by two different names. The authors are the people who wrote it, and the owners are the people who get paid. Some of the authors are no longer with us, some are. And the owners may be their estates, maybe beneficiaries that now get paid. In terms of negotiating the numbers, however, the numbers are pretty much the same, though they're distributed differently.
Let's talk about ticket prices a minute, because I do think it's on everybody's mind as we go into even a new season where I think there's been an escalation. A new musical just opened. I think the top ticket is now $75. What's your top ticket, and how does that all go together? And
Our top ticket's $67.50 on weekends and $65 on weekdays. And we recently raised the prices to $67.50. And the answer to the question that you would ask is because we could.
Because what?
Because we could. And because the expenses on a show are so enormous that on a Saturday night with a hot ticket, it's a supply and demand.
Supply and demand.
And I would rather that we didn't have to, but we did. Also,
what is your low ticket?
$15.
How do you get that?
Well, we have a large theater. So when we scaled the house, when we talked about it, we wanted to make sure that there were a certain number of tickets available at a very low price, and $15 is about as low as you could go. So if you want to see Damn Yankees, you can buy a ticket for $15. It was just really an arbitrary choice. I mean, the
Between
financial...
the 15 and the 65 or 67, what is there?
There's, Charlotte, what is 25?
35, 45, depending on whether it's the weekend.
You
or
have that
weeknight.
sliding
There's
scale.
a definite progression.
How big is the house?
1,596 seats.
So is it the third or fourth largest in New York?
It's one of the top 5.
Yeah.
That's
Do
one
you
of
have
the
a
nice things
student
about the
ticket
theater.
price?
$15.
That's a student.
And then we have special student rates for groups, and we have special student programs, and those sort of prices are flexible for students. And we do have a very good student policy for any seats over 20.
What forces you to make that 65 or 67.50 price?
What forced us to do it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that it was a question of forcing.
Well, I mean,
us.
what comes into it?
Well, he told the truth because they could, they did.
No, but before that, before you come to 65, how do you rise to 65? Why not 35? Why not 45?
In other words, I think what you're saying, we're starting out.
I don't think any producer today opening a show on Broadway even considers a price less than 65 for a musical. That's the price that musicals are getting. There is a perception in the marketplace that if musicals are getting $65 and you charge $45, that there's something wrong with your show. So, as silly as that may sound, it's the truth. So you really...
If you could charge $45 and you could overcome that with your advertising and your version, could you do that?
You couldn't make money.
No,
you could not.
I think that, you start out, it's a simple calculation. We have X number of seats, 1,596. 8 performances. We're going to multiply that out. We're going to say how much it costs us.
90% or 100%?
Well, start at gross. Okay, maximum gross potential. Okay, measure that against what it's going to cost us a week, which we talked about at $380,000. And then I have to go to an investor and say, investor, this is how long it's going to take you to get your investment back at 100% of capacity, 90% of capacity, and 80% of capacity. How do I sell that? That's where the ticket price comes from.
It's interesting, Charlotte brings up this point that if you charge $45, the public's perception is that there's something wrong with you. And we talk about that a lot in the advertising meetings, that it's very, very discouraging because there are times where you could charge $45 or have an inclination to do it on specific performances at certain times of the year. And it always comes out that in these
I
discussions...
think that's a misconception. All the people that I know I've talked to, whether in the bus or in my living room, say, if only the price was less, I could go to the theater more often. I used to go. Nobody
if
says
everybody's
it was
price was less.
We know that there are many more people who would like to go to the theater than can afford to go. And including some of us up here, it's expensive, even for us, to go to the theater. And it should be more democratic. You're absolutely right. The awful catch-22 is that in order to be responsible to your investors, you can't have a show that you can't expect to pay back in 5 years or 6 years. You have to be more responsible than that. And if the costs of putting on the production are so exorbitantly high, you have to be able to reliably and responsibly make an appeal to someone that you're asking for money from, to say it's not going to, you'll still be alive at the time we can pay you back.
Isabel, and one of the sessions you should have is to invite the people from the league dealing with the Alliance, which is a way of hopefully bringing inexpensive productions of straight plays to Broadway with low ticket prices. And what Charlotte has just described,
but you know what's happening with that? You know what's happening with that, Robert? Is that there's a cap on. Okay, there's an example. There's a 650 just went up to $700,000 production cap on the Alliance, and there was a 35 just went up to $37.50
for advertising.
Ticket price. Top price $37.50 on weekends, $35 on weekdays. Now that same production can be done for $500,000 off-Broadway, and you can charge off-Broadway whatever you want. So that's what's happening now. There's a trend begun or recently publicized by Neil Simon taking his Broadway off-Broadway theater for the first time for one of his plays. It's going to happen because off-Broadway, you can charge $45 or $50. The same thing that's happened on Broadway will now start to happen off-Broadway because that's where the excess is going.
Why is it if you can charge that off-Broadway and they don't think, oh, because it's cheaper,
you've got a 500-seat theater and you can use the best copy line, the best advertising slogan that's ever been invented. Sold out, you can't get a ticket. It's easier to be able to say that and more often in a 500-seat house than in a 1,596-seat house.
Would you go off-Broadway, Mitchell?
I own 3 off-Broadway theaters.
Yes.
And I've produced extensively off-Broadway.
When you made your decision for Damn Yankees, it was definitely for a Broadway house because of the largeness of the whole thing.
And also because of what we were trying to accomplish.
Right.
There are certain shows that really shouldn't be produced on Broadway because the expectations are too high, and the ticket prices, no matter what you do, are going to be at a certain level that you have to deliver a certain event. And off-Broadway, the perception of what you are expecting is sort of less, and you can deliver what you're expected to deliver in an off-Broadway house at a lesser price. Also, I mean, this is a very long discussion, but the union situations.
You can only give 8 performances a week.
Let me.
You can only have 1,000 seats in your theater.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, we have curtain times at 8 o'clock for some arbitrary reason. They used to be at 8:30. They used to be at 7:30. We have matinees at 2 because long ago women tended not to work, and so they were available to go to the theater at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We picked a Wednesday. Now that's no longer the case. Everybody dies at their 2 o'clock matinees on Wednesday. You want to be able to put on. You want to be able to put on a Peter Pan at a different time than a Tom Stoppard play. You can't do it because there has to be a certain number of hours between performances, a certain number of hours between matinee and evenings, a certain number of hours that actors need to rest.
Negotiate with the unions such as General Motors did. It's their industry. If they're going to continue this way, and if the theater is going to continue, it will only be events and spectacles.
Well, Charlotte,
I think it'll come to that.
Can you give us a sort of a here in 1994? What is the let us say the union minimum for IATSE, stagehands, and 802? There are minimums.
There are minimums.
What are those? Just so we know, and things like beaters or all those. I mean,
a stagehand gets a union minimum. You have 2 kinds of stagehands. You have ones that work for the theater and ones that work for the show.
Right.
The ones that work for the show, I think their minimum is officially on paper about $500 a week. You won't get one of them to work for you for that kind of money.
What's the difference between working for the theater and working for the show? I don't understand.
The only difference is who their employer is and who pays them. The ones who work for the show, it started because of touring shows, and when you go into a different town every week, you have to have a stagehand who knows when the fly cues are pulled, and he tells the locals, pull that one, pull this one, pull that one. It's held over, and you do it in New York, even though it is slightly a different situation.
so that's a 500 minimum, and they don't work
but
for
none
that.
of them work for that. They earn between $1,200 and $1,400 a week as opposed
per
to
man,
their
and then they
minimum.
can tell you how many must work that show. They can basically.
When you set the show up, there are rules that are really not written down clearly as to how many people you need to do how many jobs. It has to do with how many different things are happening once on the fly floor. Say,
Sure.
if you have 8 things moving at once, you need 8 men. You can manipulate that to a certain extent, and when you get down to a crunch, you have to really negotiate each separate situation with the union head and bargain it out.
Well, let's talk about musicians too. The 802 local. What is their minimum?
I would say theirs is approximately $800 a week, and then they get certain increments if they play doubles, more than like they play 2 different kinds of clarinets. You add on to it, etc. So that most musicians are making probably between $800 and $1,200 a week.
There's also a different minimum regarding musicians, and that's the number of musicians you have to have, which is based on the house, not based on your artistic needs.
And that's where we have the famous walkers.
Yes.
And if we talk about ticket prices and what one can do about them, Rick's addressed the fact that as the society has changed, performance time should change without productions being penalized by old, stale union requirements. Also, we've had a situation in Damn Yankees in which we have actually laid off IA men because as the show evolved, we realized we could have cued the show differently. And we didn't have to keep somebody to do 1 cue.
And you could do that?
It was
not easy.
It was very,
I was going to say, that must have been quite
Yeah,
traumatic.
well, that was an accommodation that you were able to make. Can't you go further with them?
We could actually go further in terms of what physically is capable. The union won't allow us to go any further because they feel we should have made these changes before we opened and not now. We feel that we should be able to learn
And what's the
from
reluctance
experience.
to the change in time that would of a scheduled timing?
What about dropping the matinee altogether?
Well, if you drop the matinee, then you have no day off. Because the actors have to,
So they have 8
have a day
performances.
off. So if you drop the Wednesday matinee and you made it Monday night, they'd play 7 shows, 7 nights a week.
I think matinees, it looks to me, it seems so important. I always get so excited when I go down 45th or 44th Street on a matinee day and see the crowds of people that are running, you know, coming from Broadway, from the Marquee, all the way down on matinees. It seems
My
to me
favorite show is a matinee. My favorite show to see of Damn Yankees is a Wednesday matinee, particularly in the summer when it was so full of kids.
Yeah, well, I think it's not. I think what Rick is saying, it's not necessarily the women who can now go. I think a lot of different people go.
And I'm not talking about the summertime either, because
No,
everything
exactly,
changes in the summer.
Sure.
But what I meant to say was just the notion that every show across the board, with minor variations, must play the same schedule is absurd, because Peter Pan should be able to play 5 shows on Saturday and Sunday, because that's when they can sell the most tickets, and not play on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because they're school nights and no parents are going to take their kids
or
to
Beauty
the
and the Beast. Is it
well, I'm trying not to mention shows that are on right now, but you know, I mean, a serious play that you know, which is inappropriate for children should not have to play 5 shows on a weekend.
Or it should be on 3 o'clock.
I remember years and years ago, a show from long ago called Starlight Express was playing. They couldn't sell tickets on a Tuesday night, and we went for about 8 weeks to every Tuesday night performance and interviewed the people who were there, giving them a choice of alternate times. And 65-1, the people in the audience were picked Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for that show. Now, you can't do a show Saturday morning at 11 o'clock because you'd have to hire a completely different cast of actors because of the actors' unions.
And the actual point is freedom of choice. We don't have much freedom of choice. Everything is sui generis. It's specific. People acting, times. If you want to do something for the theater, just a little piece that nobody understands. The ABC ads, many people get their times from the ABC ads in the New York Times. It's surprising to people that we have to pay for those ads. The motion
I was just talking about during the break, the movie clock for film studios that have advertising budgets of combined $1 billion a year at least is a free service in every newspaper in this city. The theatrical directory is not. A little pishky off-Broadway show that has to scrape together $10 a week to be able to promote itself, $9 out of that money has to go to get itself into a directory, which is perceived by the public as a free service.
How did that come about?
Well, that's different. That's another seminar.
And we go back to what Mitchell said.
We have a lot of questions that our audience is going to ask, and so talk amongst yourselves now until they get started. We have a question.
I have a question for the marketing people, both the advertisers and the press rep. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm a former Washingtonian, and I was a fan of the Senators before the Griffiths moved them out of town. And I wondered, I know that this is not something that you've had a problem with Damn Yankees, but we all know that bad reviews do happen, and they are said to be the cause of closing shows early sometimes. What strategies do you have that you've used successfully to either overcome those reviews when they do happen or to indemnify yourself against them beforehand? Are there things you can do to keep a show running in spite of...
You mean with the mixed review?
Mixed reviews, poor reviews, mediocre reviews.
Peter, why don't you start?
Rather than the raves that you all got.
Peter?
I think what we have to do with almost every show, if the show gets good notices or bad notices or mixed notices, you just have to explore different elements of the production to further highlight. If it's you know, the costume designs, the sets, I mean, we on a publicity angle, we try to explore all those elements. For reviews and getting people into the theater right away is really much more of a Rick question, in that the advertising plays a much more immediate, has much more of an immediate impact on getting, if it's going to take some attention at the box office.
I can say it quickly in this way. We try to anticipate that every show. There you are. We try to anticipate every show to be as huge a success as it possibly can be, but plan for a show to get unanimous Pan reviews. That way, we're never surprised. We're never left with our pants down by reviews that we haven't been expecting. It's gravy if we get great reviews, and Damn Yankees happen to get great reviews. But you can't go into promoting a project thinking, gee, well, you know, we really should hold everything back until after to make, you know, we'll see what happens. Because you never get a second chance to make a first impression. The first impression that a show has to make is that your life will somehow be improved for seeing it, and you'd be crazy to miss it. And that's how we try to approach everything that we do.
Thank you.
My question is probably for the Maxwells and Ms. Wilcox. Mr. Ellis talked about how audiences are going to shows nowadays more for the spectacle oftentimes than for the content of the actual show. By contrast, you have a lot of shows several shows have just announced that they'll be cutting stagehands and also cutting certain scenic elements and simplifying them to cut costs. How do you reconcile an audience's desire to see something impressive with the need to cut costs on your set and on your various production budget? Well,
First of all, I should say, just for the record, that Damn Yankees delivers all of the excitement of a big Broadway musical. It just delivers it in a more human way. When I talked about laying off a stagehand, I talked about it because what we discovered after the intensity of opening a show, with the technical aspects being resolved at tech rehearsals and dress rehearsals and previews, with the clock running and hemorrhaging money every day, when you have some time and space to look at that, you could say, I could have done that better. I could have cued it differently. It doesn't look any different to the audience, but I can save manpower, I can save some money. We did Damn Yankees really as a show to go against the huge special effects. We think Damn Yankees is and was and will be a show about heart, which is the theme song, and it's about the redemptive power of love, and it's about how in the heat of passion one could make a mistake and make a deal with the devil, whether literally or euphemistically, and how one, through the redemptive power of love, can overcome that. And those are universal themes, those are universal stories that have been told, for 2,000 years. So if you deliver the humanity of something, I think that the audience can be touched, can be moved, and doesn't miss all that scenery. So I just think it's in the delivery of the product. And also, from an economic point of view, we started with a number that we said, this is what we can spend on the show, and as a fiduciary, have some realistic hope of returning this money, and then have the ability to do another show. So we didn't start with an $8 million number and say, okay, let's hope that we get the greatest reviews since, whatever, and we'll be fine. We took a different approach.
This question is for Charlotte Wilcox and Victoria Maxwell, and this billing has nothing to do with your respective ability and importance. What are the numbers? Are there many women producers and general managers?
Well, I think, Charlotte, you're the biggest female general manager.
Well, this decade,
most prominent.
There have never been that many female general managers. You get 2 or 3, every generation, and I suppose with every generation you'll get more and more. But it's not a large number. And producers, the same thing.
I think there's more and more female producers now. But I know that Mitchell and I are the only brother-sister producing team in New York right now.
I have to say here that Antoinette Perry was a woman, and she was a producer and a director. I don't think she was a general manager, but that's how the whole Tony Awards started. So she was a woman before her time, and I had to bring that in. Yes.
Well, this is a question for the producers. Have you ever, or would you ever, contemplate being active in putting together a creative team? In other words, if somebody came to you with a great idea for a musical, would you then say, would you go ahead and find the composer, find the lyricist, if you've got a good book writer?
That's what we do. I mean, that's, in essence, that was all the only difference between Damn Yankees and a new show is that it was written, but we had to start with the underlying material, and then we brought the creative team together, the designers, the director, the choreographer, and so on.
Other than Damn Yankees, have you done that before?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Often. We've done it on stage and on film many times.
But producers are always looking for a good idea.
Yes.
My question, you mentioned that you got the special right to change the book, which you don't always get. And my question is, what were your concerns as you updated it for the 90s, and then what was the team you put together who actually made those decisions creatively?
Well, our concerns were simply that the show was written in the 50s initially, and there were two major concerns. One was that musicals were written in the 50s in a different way than they are written today. The theater didn't have the technology in the 50s to move scenery out of the floor and out of the wings in front of the audience. So 50s musicals, and they were considered George Abbott musicals because he created it, were performed in front of a traveler where they changed scenery behind the traveler, so we had a lot of in-ones. We were concerned about the old-fashioned quality of that technical approach. On a book level, we were concerned that the attitudes toward women, particularly when the book was written, were no longer going to fly in the 90s. Specifically, and just by one example, the wife in Damn Yankees is abandoned by her husband, who goes off to be a baseball player. she's never angry. She never asked why or where he went.
She was never angry.
She was never angry. And when he comes back at the end of the play, he says, don't ask where I've been, and she says, fine. Now, we felt that in the 90s that wasn't going to happen. So we changed that kind of thing, and the work was done with Mr. Abbott and with our director, Jack O'Brien, who actually adapted the book.
Mitchell, thank you very much, and thank you so much for being here. This has been one of the most informative seminars I've ever had on this panel here, and these people have been telling us all about Damn Yankees. They're the production team, and it's been a marvelous lesson in how to produce from every angle. I'm most grateful to them, and I think you've all learned a great deal, as I know I have. This is the American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater, and this seminar was on the production and the production team of the show Damn Yankees. It's coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Yes, we will.